All right. Good morning. Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and been a long but very fascinating week for me. And I'm lucky to have had such a very interesting and well-informed guests. Bill Taylor on Monday night, and let's see, what else did we have this week? Well, last night was Diane. Sarah was really a blast for me. I feel like she's a genuine. You talk to her and you're getting the real item. You're not getting a presentation like someone had complimented her. As it doesn't matter which audience you talk to, you say the same thing. That's integrity, and I'm all for that. And so, if you're in New York, and if you haven't checked out Diane Sayre yet, please look at my uh, interview with her last night here on McDuff Lives 2, also on McDuff Lives on Facebook, and also on Twitter. We've had also David Cranmer Underdown this week, another fascinating show with him, and I really want to uh, have somehow to put all of his amazing stuff together. I I know he's probably going to be writing a book someday. Maybe he's already started, but all that information is still right there, on his Twitter and on the interviews that he does on my show and other people's shows. So he's a powerhouse of information. David Cranmer Underdown is, and let's uh, let's keep on supporting him by just letting everybody know what's going on. Check out David Cranmer Underdown. Now, the two of them, Bill Taylor and David, are going to join me on next Wednesday. We're going to have a new trio Wednesday nights. Our good friend Mark Kulak wanted to take a couple of months off, so we'll be back with him probably after the first of the year. But our trios will continue, and the first one will be David and Bill Taylor. Uh, David specifically requested that, and I'm looking forward to it. Next week will be a busy week with Harley Schlanger back, and the election on November 8th will give us a lot to talk about. Well, good morning to Alderson and Robert Corky and Sergeant Stadenko, aka Lard Ass. Oh my. My wife has started calling Toto Sir Tubbalard, and I think it's kind of unkind. I mean, on the other hand, it is kind of true because, he's starting to look a little chubby. I don't know about you, Sergeant Stadenko, but Corky says if David writes a book, Corky will write his. It- it's an incredible challenge, though. For some people are natural writers, and some people learn to write. And I personally, whenever I wrote, it was because I had to write. It was before, to write a paper for college or to, oh, I hated him. I'd go to the library, and started, but I just couldn't stay there. I'd get distracted. So the night before it was due, there I'd be up, 1 o'clock in the morning, still trying to make some sensible paper. And I wasn't a straight A student at William and Mary, but I did get past. I, I did get a degree, um, a Bachelor of Arts in Government, which I really think at the time was like, well, that's probably the best niche for me because I had not done well in physics. I I had gone from physics and then into math, where I wanted to catch up with my math skills because I hadn't had calculus in high school. And so I ended up taking 2.5 years of advanced math before I realized that I wasn't a mathematician either. That also was too much. But I started studying with a really great professor, Professor Roger Smith at William and Mary, who got me into American and world political philosophy and the all the theories of government that you study from, uh, you know, well, Rousseau, Kant, um, and all the British, and the great thing about Professor Smith was that he introduced me to the psychological aspects of it as well. He wrote a book or a compilation of essays, including his own. It's simply titled Guilt, and the use of guilt as a political tool. Well, that's awfully related to what we've been discovering here on the channel and with our colleagues, and that is the power of propaganda and the intentional deception of the general public as part of a political agenda. Well, one of the books that Professor Smith had us read and study was called Civilization and Its Discontents. By whom? You know, Sigmund Freud. Yes, and Herr Freud um, had these theories that somehow worked out real well with Calvinists and bankers and people that value human life somewhere slightly above that of your average cattle. Um, these theories blossomed, and why? Because they were politically convenient to these, eugenicists and genocide. Well, civilization and its discontents is kind of a projection of his theories about humans, Oedipus complex and all that stuff. But it's a justification for really the abuse of the common person. It's much more than that, but without trying to reconstruct what Freud was saying in the book, what I'm trying to say is that by virtue of Professor Smith's introduction of that subject to me, it gave me a pre-understanding of what I was going to learn when I studied the book about Freud's son-in-law, Edward Bernays, propaganda. And you can hear me reading that book on McDuff Lives 1. By the way, while I'm just rambling, I want to remind everyone that McDuff Lives 1 is still there. It's got a few hundred videos on it, a number of good book readings, including that of Bernays. And the other book that you can hear me read and comment on, I didn't do the whole book, but this is one that's been in my mind this week. Dr. Greg Poulgrain's book, JFK versus Allen Dulles, because if we're talking about going back to the gold standard or tying the dollar to the gold, is that a remedy that we can reasonably rely upon? Is that something that if a politician says, "Hey, let's solve this by tying back to the gold standard," what's in this book ought to be really, really important to your understanding of who has all the gold, because of the Freeport sulfur concession or connection there, and it's all the same folks. It's Rockefellers. We talked about that with David Cranmer Underdown a bit on this past Wednesday, and I think if you're talking about tying things to gold, then be careful, because there's people out there that have control over far more gold than you will ever see in your lifetime. And if you think of gold as the currency, then you're basically giving them the power to conduct those financial manipulations that we've seen time and time again that end up with them owning everything. So, but thinking of that big mountain of gold there is a good metaphor for understanding what we really are facing economically. And it is the the power of money, the power of gold, the power of wealth. And because people see how wealth creates power, and so they want power, so they want to get wealth so that they'll have power. Well, the existing piles of wealth are already far beyond the amount that anybody could ever put together as an individual in their lifetime. I mean, unless they just killed everybody and said, finally, I'm the king of the hill, but everybody else is dead. No, the the combined wealth that is now in corporations and ancient family holdings in Swiss banks is just too much to fight against if you fight on their terms. And they understand on top of that that they have the fractional banking system. So literally every time they discover a new ounce of gold, then they can print more money as derivatives of that actual wealth, just like the fractional reserve banking system itself. If people don't understand that not only do they already have so much wealth, but they also have the financial system, which allows them to multiply it over and over and over again, as long as we're willing to let them get away with it. And we don't even see it yet. That's what I'm trying to do, is to illustrate the problem. The problem is not that we don't have a currency tied to gold. The problem is that we don't have currency that has value in the first place. I'd be interested in trying to put a basket of metals into a new coin, but so much of wealth is already concentrated, like the Kazakhstan nuclear energy bank, right? They're going to have a banking system just for nuclear power, so that if you need some nuclear fuel rods to fuel your country's energy needs, then you can go to the bank of nuclear fuel. And as I understand, that's all run by the same people, with Warren Buffett is kind of a figure that definitely is involved, and somebody you can identify with that by just Googling it. Um, okay, well, let's go back to. Wait a minute, Sergeant. Sergeant, you said that you talked to somebody whose dad worked at the DC field office under McDuff. Oh my God. Well, please find some way to get that person in touch with me, because I'd love to talk uh, to that retired pilot. Um, this is the kind of thing that thrills me, is that there's still people out there, at least children of people out there, that might know something about my dad's career, and to place you know my dad specifically in the hierarchy of the FBI. I'd like to have an organization chart to see where he was. um, Anybody that knew him, or his, as you say, may have had some stories. And so anyway, thank you for saying that, and please uh, get in touch with me. You can send me a note through screamingospreys.com, where it says contact McDuff. ScreamingOspreys.com. That's our website. This is a photograph of a osprey screaming at us as we were in our very first meeting together, a charrette that we held in Annapolis, Maryland. And we were out on the harbor and we were in a little water taxi, and we started coming up closer and closer to this bird's nest, and the bird started screaming at us. And that's the beginning of our theme of the Screaming Ospreys. And you can get one of these mugs, screamingospreys.com mug, over at screamingospreys.com. I've got 3 or 4 of them. I don't think we make any money on them. I haven't seen a single dime out of it. But on the other hand, maybe there will come a time. But anyway, they're pretty cool cups. So if you want one, you can get them over there at the website. And thank you so much for passing along copies of my book. This is the book. It's only what 90. Let's see, no, 78 pages, 76 pages. I thought it was 90. Anyway, and over at Amazon is where you can get it. If anybody wants a signed copy, do send me a note and I will figure out a way to do that for you. You can just get a regular copy by going to Amazon. On the Kindle, it's $9.99, and if you want the paperback, it's $20. And I wish it was. I wish I may. I feel like, geez, it's not that long a book. I shouldn't charge so much. But guys, if you knew the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it, you'd understand. It's a substantial part of 4 years of my life. So that's why it's at $20, is so I can recover a little bit out of each one. I think out of $20, I probably get about $10. So that's the way that works. It's great to be able to do it because I didn't know how to publish anything, but the simple program at Kindle uh, enabled me, with great help from Drummer, my wife, to get it done, and also help from Andy DeBala, who is a good colleague from those days a year ago. And I understand he's gotten quite active on his own program now. So all the best to you, Andy. Yeah, anybody that has my book, if you would go over to Amazon and put a review in there. I had 5 stars for the longest time, and then somebody, an anonymous person, put a 3-star one in there, and it brought it down to 4.5. And I thought, hey, that's not right. This person didn't even put a comment, but they give me a 3-star. Well, if you have a few moments to put a positive review in there, get me back to my 5 stars, that would be a nice thing to do. Speaking of lard ass and um, Sir Tub-a-Lot, my dad was um, a large man. He was 6'3", and I can't remember if he said he was 6'3 1/4" or 6'3 3/4", but it was he was precise about it. He didn't want you to shortchange him in any way as far as his height, and that was one thing I always wanted to be taller than him, and I eventually did. I'm about a half inch taller than he was, but never as big as he was. He was pure muscle for the first 30 years of his life, and then as life started to happen, he acquired his went back to his youthful um, corpulence. He tended to put on weight. Had one of those types of bodies, but it was always always an issue with J. Edgar Hoover, because Hoover did not allow his agents to be over their uh, the weight as to on the official weight charts that the government had. But my dad almost always was over it. And if I look through his civil service records, you can see where somebody, and I think it was Hoover personally, kind of taped over the signatures taped over like they're they don't want you to see who signed off on it, but they said, uh, he's a big boned man, and it's not unusual for his frame, that sort of thing. But then what was really funny was when, I mean, shocking, honestly, to me was when I read Cassidy's Run. And in Cassidy's Run, when my dad, you know, is recruited by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to become part of the Saxa operation, he is said to be a overweight agent that in, the implication was that Hoover didn't really have much use for him and was happy to get rid of him and send him over to the Pentagon because of his weight. And, that's the kind of thing that you notice when you read these books is that no, no, no. He didn't send him there because of his weight, but you don't want us to understand what he was really there for. So you cover it up with a story like that. David Wise, sorry, you passed away before I got to talk to you. But no, Hoover didn't send him there. They recruited him. The people that recruited him, two of the three of them were DIA agents. And more Air Force, but also, I think a Navy guy. I was a Navy captain. My dad's story is still not been told as far as what really happened, but it all has to do with the great fight in our government between the people that ran the coup against John F. Kennedy and the people that maybe didn't object to it, but they wouldn't have done it on their own. I'm talking about the military, the chiefs at the time, because the people that killed Kennedy, that they are definitely associated with the European, the Jean de Menil and uh, Schlumberger, the de Mohrenschildt, and through that, of course, they're all connected. This is what I'm so happy to be working closely with David on is how, you know, at what point are they all connected, and at what point are they fighting each other? Like the old China connection with the Taiwanese, from uh, to Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan. She flies there with a escort of fighter jets because why? Well, she's defying the wishes of the government, but she does it anyway. She's answering to some authority in Taiwan. It's obvious. And as David pointed out on our show Wednesday night, this is the place of AIG and the Vanderstar and these old business connections that go back to the Kuomintang, the KMT, and that is the entity which was supplying opium, and in China, that was their business. They were an army. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Chiang Kai-shek didn't have an army, but the financing was opium. And all of that, those connections, as David points out, they don't end. They don't just go away at the end of a war. And so more and more, we're finding that the layers of deception are really covering things that are decades, if not centuries old. And they haven't gone away. They took them off the headlines so you don't see them, but they're still there. So the people that are connected to the old Chiang Kai-shek nationalist Chinese, they have their concession, their drug routes, their whatever they do, their own dark economy. But then so do the others, the ones that come out of the Wall Street gang, the Allen Dulles gang. That's in my view. Let me put it this way. One of the theories that I've been studying this week is that Western capital in the person of Henry Kissinger kind of opened up China, and the Western investments went in, and but that there came a time, maybe 20, 30 years later, that the Chinese felt that they didn't really need to kowtow to the Western banking system anymore, specifically the Banks of London and the Atlantic Council related American interests, Wall Street. And they said, well, we're going to now be an independent country. We're building our own infrastructure. We're going to have our own currency. We're going to build our own economy. And we're going to do it along the lines of sensible economic growth instead of what's happening in the United States, which is just speculation. And so they got strong enough, their currency becomes fungible with Western currencies. That was a big thing. And now, there's wealth spread all around China, but also in connection with the general state of war that the American administration is waging, the Western capital is leaving China. And that's causing China to have financial problems, and they may have a great crash. The stories on that I've been watching at a site I follow called Defense Politics Asia on YouTube. He does both battle reports and also big picture politics reports about Asia, and I do recommend his analysis. He's good. Well, think of that model, okay, of the the former colonial outposts being given access to the Western banking system, and then they build themselves up, and they get to the point where they're going to be independent and not need the London banking system anymore. And that's when things start going bad because those people with the loans, they've got things on a string. They could say, well, yeah, we gave that to you, but look at clause 357 in the bottom line of your contract here. If you do this, I get to pull on the string and it comes back to me. Uh-oh, you didn't read the fine print, did you? Well, that kind of, hard-nosed banking lawyering practice, is that's how they win. And now consider that in the context of the United States. Because as we've been studying, when you get to the Roosevelt administration, you find that America is now becoming an empire. And they're going, to Hawaii, they're going to the Philippines, they're going to Cuba, they're going to Central America. Um, and, they've got a foothold in China, which they've had a long time. And suddenly Great Britain starts realizing, hey, these fellow imperialist buddies of ours, these American Wall Street types, um, they've started to get kind of uppity, like they can do their own thing, like they can go and take, places that we probably would like to have for our own colonies, like, say, China, Japan, Korea, Asia generally. America starts to look like a threat. Then you have the oil that suddenly becomes a source of independent wealth in Texas and Oklahoma, and those uh, nouveau riche Texans, by controlling the government and getting the oil depletion allowance and every other concession that they could possibly want, have a cartel of oil that seems to be endless. And so, well, wait a minute, they don't need the British for that. And so there's where in comes what I have called the Yankee and Cowboy War, um, by Carl. Oh gosh, one of the guys, the founders of the SDS. I can't remember his last name, but I read 5 or 6 excerpts of the book on my channel. It's called The Yankee and Cowboy War. I think I was on McDuff Lives 3 at that time. You know, anytime you're looking for anything I've done, just put McDuff and the name of the channel, the name of the subject. So if you put McDuff and JFK versus Allen Dulles, you'll find it, even though it's on McDuff Lives 1 and the other ones might be on McDuff Lives 3 or McDuff Lives 2. Sorry about that, but because they keep giving me strikes, I have to keep hopping. So that's my theory, is that the British banking system decided to break away and then crush the existing American imperial system, the one that had developed under Teddy Roosevelt and Wilson and the, the Hoover, Herbert Hoover, and to crush it. And for that, they used the Sullivan and Cromwell. And so that the American financial system that was starting to get big enough to be liberated from the British financial system became the object of getting crushed by Wall Street and London. And as that, massive undertaking goes along, more and more assets that have been formerly of the first American empire, such as the FBI, a very good example. Hoover was working for the old money. Dulles is working for the new money. Look at it, as simple as that. Although, the new money is just more a different face of the really old money, if you know what I'm saying. So the Sullivan and Cromwell, the Dulles people, um, John Foster Dulles, they are reimposing the British system into America. And it's not done yet because they're still having to squeeze people. to get control of the whole dark economy. The dark economy. I think that's what they're fighting over. Well, Sergeant Stadenko, you got me thinking. Thank you for that. All right, new comments. Let's see. Gorky Goss says the gold of Egypt was made and not mined. Well, do tell. I wouldn't mind making some gold before everybody else learns how to do it. No, I'm not. I'm happy to learn things like that. I've started. From time to time, I look into the pyramids and the theory that it was some type of energy generating machine through uh, various forms, whether a pendulum or resonance of amber, the piezo or piezo effect. And I'd love to see, somebody build a pyramid and start generating enough power to fly those um, prehistoric Babylonian aircrafts around. I'd love to see it. It's all interesting, but it's just a little too esoteric for me to spend a lot of time on right now. But gosh, Corky, that'd be great. Nazi gold, Yamashita gold, Inca gold, Grand Canyon gold, who owns it? Well, they own it, of course. We don't own it. They got it. They grabbed it all up. Russia confiscated oligarchs' ownership of business in Crimea. Okay. Crimea has always been a trading post, and one of the main trading commodities, sadly to say, was human slavery. The Genoans had Genoa, Italy. These are, Venice and Genoa, the two competing um, commercial empires based on sea power. And Genoa was really invested in the slave market and in the Crimea and in Odessa. The history of slavery is very fascinating and very little known, but it certainly didn't start with Scarlett O'Hara, and it's been there a long, long, long time, but it hasn't been there forever. And the conditions of what we call slavery have changed over the centuries. Very deep subject, takes a lot of time to study, get into the history of slavery. Very important, though. Miss Hunt, how are you, dear? Oh, John, people like me in the trenches have seen it, and we don't get heard, and we get blocked, and we lose our voice, and we get blamed. We certainly don't get interviewed on the show once a week. Well, if you want to be on the show, send me a note at screamingospreys.com that says contact McDuff, and let's see what you'd like to talk about. I'm certainly open to it. Head twit Elon like Kanye, now feeling the corporate wrath for the crime of buying Twitter. Yeah, I see. Elon Musk is one of them. I mean, he's at some level. I don't know which side he's on, if there's sides, but I mean, they have. He has. He's launching satellites for the U.S. Space Force. By the way, they just sent up a new satellite for the U.S. Space Force testing. I to, was saw in uh, one person's post that it's some kind of hypersonic weapons that they're testing. But no, hey, we really do have a space force now. It's a sixth branch of our military, and they're up there. What are they doing? I don't know, but that's the high ground. They looking down on us. They're devising ways to fight wars from up there. And they are way, way ahead of us in terms of understanding, what can and cannot be done from a platform, 100 miles up. It's something we all should be very, very suspicious of. It's the idea of, hey, we need a space force, and we don't even know anything about what's going on up there. It's very bad. No, nobody should need a space force. We should completely demilitarize space. Ilana Freeland is way ahead on all these issues, and I want to get her back on the show soon. I heard from some people that are great supporters of hers saying, John, get her back on the show. And I've been so busy with other things and, traveling and doing my other studies that I hadn't been able to yet. But I'm putting that on the agenda. We'll see if Catherine Jumping Mouse can get Ilana Freeland on the show because we need to talk about these satellites and what appears to be a control grid being built around the entire planet while we, you know, fight over, you know, the story of the day. Scott Ritter, you know, he was on Garland Nixon yesterday or the day before. You should see it just to see how vociferous he gets about uh, Representative Jamie Raskin uh, from Montgomery County, a very, very liberal county in Maryland. It's the northern suburb of Washington, D.C. And, that's where, the CIA folks early on, Chevy Chase. Remember the comedian Chevy Chase? Well, Chevy Chase Circle is the border between Washington, D.C. and Montgomery County. And that's where a lot of those early social types bought. And it is significant that my dad chose not to go there, but to the other side of town where we grew up in Southern Maryland. Well, right. Hoover had the same lunch every day. Well, he's one of those characters that James Corbett kind of got me started by reviewing a book by Jerry O'Doherty about Hoover and the deceptive Belgian food famine that was created by Hoover, who was invested in these companies that profited by sending food to Belgium, but the food wasn't really going to Belgium. It was really going to Germany because Germany was starving and they couldn't fight the war if they starved. So, so of course, Herbert Hoover steps up and sends American relief food to Belgium, which is really going to Germany so that they can feed their soldiers and keep the war going, which is another horrific example of the manipulation of the American people by these banks. You know, the church outlawed usury. It was over 1,000 years that usury was outlawed, and usury does not mean excessive interest. It means charging any interest at all because it's obvious to people even 2,000 years ago that a system based upon uh, interest is going to end up concentrating all the money in a few hands because interest is not value. There's nothing there. If you have to pay somebody 10% of what they loaned you, where did you get that 10%? Well, you had to get it from somewhere else. You know, it isn't it, it isn't sustainable. And people have known that, at least the people that have been in government have known that for thousands of years. But then the temptation, especially in wartime, to borrow money is just irresistible. You'd rather borrow money and commit a mortal sin than not borrow money. So you come up with this device of borrowing from the Jews. And by doing that, you create a whole culture of the court Jews, the ones that are privileged because they have access to banking and can lend you the money that you need to defeat your enemy so that you'll own all of his resources, and that's how you make a profit. But obviously, it's not sustainable. And so money needs to have intrinsic value so that instead of it being a financial scheme whereby over maybe 10 or 20 years, a bank can acquire all the assets of a population, it becomes a legitimate means of exchange. If I've got a quarter that's made out of silver and everybody else's quarters are made out of silver, then we all know that, silver has some intrinsic value. And so we're comfortable holding on to it or using it just to feel safe. If you got a a closet full of rolled up quarters, you feel like you got some money. But these quarters that you get now are just these little thin, lightweight, cheap, worthless coins that are you don't get a sense of safety when you're holding on to one of these or the fake copper pennies we have now. Hard-nosed attorney, that's me. That's right. Hey, I turned 70 this past month in October, and about the same time I turned in my license to practice in DC. I never use it, and I was spending $600-700 a year just to keep it. So it became time, but I still have my practice in Maryland. Haven't closed it down, and although I haven't tried a case in over 10 years now, I uh, I still have the the fire in the belly when I see injustice, And from time to time, I feel like, you know what? Maybe this time I'm going to jump in. But it's best that I don't. I think I'm more valuable putting together my research and talking about, the reality of what happened to my father and how that's what's going on with the country, that the deception of youth, the inducement of youth into a system that at some point they're going to have to either join in the corruption or walk away. And if you learn a little bit too much, then you're going to suffer an early death. And in a lot of the studies that they're doing now are trying to figure out how to cause somebody to have an early death that really is untraceable and that they think, nobody's ever going to realize that it was us. And in my dad's case, I think we have a real chance of showing that they do these things to prevent them from doing it in the future, to show that yes, they have weaponized cancer. Yes, they have weaponized hundreds of things that they call viruses. And yes, they have put them into us in various ways over decades, experimenting to understand how they can control us, how they can time medical disasters in our lives, how they can weaken us so that we can't be effective, and how they can make horrible examples of us so that others are intimidated. And that is McDuff's story. And in a way, that's America's story. We're the great shining hope of mankind, but we're held back by the financial intrigues, by the war for control over our finances, and by the depth of a system of imperial arrogance that has existed as long as there's been Western civilization. And we as a country, as a nation, have to resume our role as that city on the hill, that shining light that says no to empire and yes to individual freedom. So that's our journey. Thanks for being with me. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. And if you are in New York or if you have a few extra bucks to toss her way, please support the candidacy of Diane Sayre for the Senate, because we definitely don't want to have another 6 years of Chuck Schumer. All right, guys. Thanks again. Thanks for your support on Patreon. Send me a note if you'd like to be on the show. I'd be glad to talk to you. And why not? It's free and it's fun. Bye now.